So many years ago, I received a ready-made spice rack. Many of you know what I mean by these. It was a rectangular box, 4 small glass bottles on each side, and it was situated on a mini Lazy Susan, so you could kind of spin around, look at the spices, see what flavors were available to you. And not only that, it came with all the spices in them, like they're already there. You didn't have to fill them up. 16 to be exact, many of which I had never used in my life. Beyond some of the standard ones you would expect, basil, oregano, there were things like celery salt. Have any of you used celery salt? What do you use celery salt for? I have no idea what celery salt even is. Things like celery salt and mustard seeds. So, growing up in a Taiwanese household, my parents are immigrants from Taiwan, where only Taiwanese food was cooked, I really had no idea what to do with a good number of these spices. So they sat there year after year after year because I don't like to waste things. I would just see them sitting there but ignore the spices. They collect dust and they remained full in their bottles until finally, because my cupboard was being full with all the other spice bottles that I would buy, I decided I would empty them out so I could refill them with spices that I actually used. As you might expect, most of them had lost any flavor they once had. Faded and crumbly, however, they still made fragrant cloud puffs when I emptied them into the trash. Except the mustard seeds. The mustard seeds, these round little suckers, when I dropped them over my plastic garbage bin, a lot of them kind of bounced off the side. Some of them made it in, but many did not. Thinking of the references that Jesus made to them, I could not help but wonder why, as I helplessly watched them roll across the kitchen floor faster than I could chase them and underneath the stove and the refrigerator, vanished amongst other bits of things like popcorn kernels and once frozen peas that have disappeared forever into those sticky crevices. So on your tables, a little silver cup there, they're full of mustard seeds. Well, they're not full, but they have some mustard seeds in them. Take one out, pass them around. Each one of you grab one of those mustard seeds, put it in the palm of your hand. That is a mustard seed. You got it? So in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew, Jesus tells the disciples that if they have faith the size of a mustard seed, that mustard seed in the palm of your hand, they can go tell trees to jump into oceans and mountains to get up and move across town. For such a tiny thing, those are some pretty bold claims. So we're continuing our series, Riddles of Jesus, as we've been looking at parables that he taught. And today's scripture brings us a very short one, only a couple of sentences long. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. That's it. End of parable. Now, when people thought of the kingdom of heaven, the mustard seed was not what came to mind. Instead, folks might have conjured up images of a majestic city adorned with the most precious of jewels, sitting at the crossroads of galaxies. Or a feast with like an overabundance of food so that nobody went hungry and you could eat and eat and eat. Or astonishing healings where those who were sick were instantly cured and made well. The kingdom of heaven implied a bigness that no one could miss. So when Jesus performed miracles like walking on water, feeding a crowd of thousands with one basket of fish, curing a blind man, the crowds were initially enthralled as they sensed that the kingdom of heaven was near at hand. They began demanding more signs, as each one Jesus did held their attention for about 5 minutes, their appetite for the sensational seemingly insatiable. Bigger, they urged. More power, they implored. Impress us. They envisioned a kingdom of heaven that would blow their minds at every single turn. It seemed to have the opposite effect on Jesus, however, as he declined to play the part of magic genie and began instead to speak to them in parables, choosing to evoke the humble mustard seed instead as a comparison to the kingdom of heaven. It was certainly not what anyone expected. After all, the experience of seeing and holding a mustard seed, not frequently noteworthy. Do you still have that seed in your hand, or do you completely forget about it? Did it just fall away? Pick it up. Are you impressed? Maybe by only how small it is. If you close your fist over it, you can easily forget that it's even there. In fact, if it did fall out of your hand, you would not even notice because it has such insignificant weight. It would be quite easy to completely disregard it. Why then compare it to the kingdom of heaven? Perhaps it is because we humans, we are drawn to the flashy and highly visible. We think that bigness and recognizable displays, those are the things that imply success. Now, as much as I would like to believe that I'm immune to this tendency, if I'm honest, I would not mind a little more allure. While I may not yearn after a castle with gilded walls, there is an image in my head of what it looks like to be a successful follower of Jesus. Could use a bit of that Pope Francis effect, that beatific smile, whether he's hanging out with the president or washing the feet of prisoners. It is easy to see why so many people are captivated by him, myself included, as he seems to exude this sort of saintly glow. It makes one imagine the religious life as one filled with these divine moments of inspiration as we meditate upon God's majesty and splendor and get lost in transcendent moments of prayer that leave you with a celestial buzz. Y'all experience that, right? I can tell you for certain that is not what this pastor's life looks like, as my days are filled with things like moving furniture from lounge to lounge, buying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tortilla chips that are now sitting in our basement, cheese at Costco, battling the copy machine, and late, lonely nights staring at the computer screen. People do not, you might be surprised to learn, stop by my office to ooh and ah over the flyer that I created on Publisher. They're not awestruck by the carpet in the building, which took ages for committees to decide upon. The kingdom of heaven is here? Show me, you might say. And this is why the parable that Jesus told his followers is so heartening, because it tweaks our eyes with a much-needed adjustment so that we can gain mustard seed vision. He beckons us to look differently at the seemingly mundane things of life, because the kingdom of heaven is hidden right there within them. There's a story which illustrates how one might acquire that kind of sight. It goes like this. You may have heard it. 3 stonemasons in the Middle Ages were hard at work when a visitor came along and asked them what they were doing. The first stonemason was hard at work, sweat beading his brow. Cutting stone, he grumbled. The second mason, though less distraught, responded with a deep sigh. I'm building a wall. The third stonemason replied with a radiant face. I am building a beautiful cathedral that will glorify God for centuries to come. Often our vision is so narrow that we think we are only cutting a stone or piling up bricks. We're unable to see how something outwardly so small can add up to much of anything. Perhaps we think giving a granola bar to someone hungry on the street is a drop in the bucket when thousands of people do not have enough to eat every day. Or that chalking on concrete all over campus to let people know about this or that is an exercise in futility when the forecast has rained that evening. Frequently, we yearn for something more obvious that tells us the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and it can be difficult for us to catch sight of how something so unexpectedly small, great things can actually come from. But Jesus gives us corrective lenses to transform our understanding of how the kingdom of heaven is present in what may seem like inconsequential acts. This is a great encouragement because there are plenty of days when I feel like one of those mustard seeds that has rolled under the stove into the sticky land of not enough. You know that place, right? Not enough time, not enough money, not enough skill, just not enough. So many times we feel like we're just not enough. It's easy for me to look at my mustard seed-sized patience, compassion, and trust and seriously doubt that anything can come of what can seem like measly efforts in comparison to all the problems of the world. Thankfully, Jesus told this parable of the mustard seed because it reminds us that it is not about us mustering enough faith to do something great. It is that whatever small bit that we have, it's enough because God is more than enough. Because the kingdom of heaven, it's not actually about golden castles and glitzy shows of power. And a life of faith, it's not about confident declarations of certainty. It is about grace enacted in the hidden places of our world. Jesus chose the mustard seed on purpose to remind us to not get distracted by the displays of grandeur and to instead pay closer attention to the ordinary, the mundane, for it is there where the seeds of God's kingdom can be found. So we're sitting here in this beautiful chapel. Soon we'll head downstairs to Lauer Hall. We'll share a meal, something that has been happening so regularly for years at Press House that it's easy to forget. There are many mustard seed moments that led up to this space, this home, this community being created. Countless meetings to ask for support for a project that one had to imagine because it did not yet exist. Bleary eyes from poring over Excel spreadsheets to figure out how to stretch a dollar further. Innumerable hours spent in committees to decide everything from paint color to policies. And on their own, each of these acts may seem trifling, whether it was a $5 donation or an evening debating floor tiles. But they became so much more because of God's power. You just need to put on mustard seed vision to see glimpses of the kingdom of heaven everywhere, all around you. Because with mustard seed vision, we realize that time spent in the kitchen downstairs getting steamy with that dishwasher, that is what makes it possible for someone struggling with depression to meet a new friend over dinner who's gone through the same thing. With mustard seed vision, we comprehend that the hundreds of cups of shared coffee can remind a lonely student that she's not alone, as God's love is made real by the presence of God's family surrounding her. With mustard seed vision, we realize that sweeping floors and wiping down tables, it creates a welcoming space where people linger, having conversations of reconciliation, where hearts are ignited for justice. With mustard seed vision, we begin to understand that these seemingly small acts are actually cornerstones that give shape to the kingdom of heaven, right here, all around us. So hold that seed in your hand one more time. Take a good look at it. Even in the moments when you feel like you can barely muster enough up of anything, forgiveness, patience, compassion, generosity, grace, love, let us remember that our God is more than enough. Thanks be to God.